promised, let's get on with this save the high score. Now, saving the high score is just a query. So we need to create a query like we did here in green. But you've done queries before in SQL, such as select star from a table. And this one is an insert query. So we're going to insert some data into the database. So I'm going to have a variable called query, and I'm going to make it one of these strings again. Let me just put a hash in there so that I can write the 3 end ones. These are the single apostrophes that you normally find above sort of the @ symbol on your keyboard. So here's my query. And it's just a standard query from any SQL document that you've looked at or website that you've looked at. So insert into, we need that, that is the standard query. What we need now is the table, which is the high score table. And then we need to say which fields we are going to be inserting into. We've got name and we've got score. So name and score. When we've done that, we need to say what the values we are going to be inserting into. This is all standard stuff. So if you're writing any insert query, the only things that are going to change is this high score, might be a different database and might be different fields. This values is going to stay the same. And now normally we write in sort of almost hard coding or using variables, something like that. But this is hard coded, and if I was a hacker, I would be looking for where we are inserting into a database with hard coded values. What we do is that we use 2 question marks. It's a kind of new feature. If you're into PHP or anything else like that on website databases, we use these. There is no variable. We're going to fill that in later. We're going to put these values in later. So that gives us the chance to check and sanitize these values before we commit them into the database. But we use question marks in there just to say there's going to be an item there and there's going to be an item there, and we're going to sanitize it, and if we need to sanitize it later. That is a very crucial, it's quite a new thing with databases. It's been around a few years, but we never used to be able to program like that, and that's why you used to get SQL injections and databases which sort of give up all of your user details, your credit cards and your passwords, just because of these question marks. That changed a few years ago, which now means that modern databases are safer, but there are still some databases out there that don't do this. So you still have to be careful when entering password and credit card details into a program. Somebody with SQL injection will be able to read your information. Right, so let's set up a variable pretty much like this, GameDB, where we connected to the high score table. Let's just call it DB for database. And I'm going to connect to the high score table. In fact, because I've already written that line of code, I'm going to copy it. Now I've used DB just because it was shorter than writing GameDB. But you could put DB up here, that would be fine. It's just something that I do. You don't need to, you can use whatever variables you like, as long as you use the same variables in the same place. So this would be DB, DB, DB. This one would be DB cursor, DB cursor. So that's the next thing we need to do is get the cursor, the pointer into the database. So I'm going to write that my cursor equals the DB cursor. Spell it right, otherwise I will get an error. So that's got my DB cursor. Now, because I am writing to the database, things might happen, such as it might not be there. And I'm going to try and write into an empty database, and that will crash the program, give us problems. So we're going to use the tried and trusted method of try. Do this, and if it doesn't work, jump down to the except part. So let me just put, keep doing that one. Why do I do that? There we go, I want the single one. Try and accept. So there's my block. So I'm going to write what I'm going to try to do. So with my cursor, that's the pointer to the database, I'm going to execute, that means run, the query. Now, not only am I going to run the query, this is where I'm going to pass in my variables to replace these two values. So if I was doing something really important with passwords and everything else, I'd sanitize them here first. But I'm not really bothered with that. I'm just going to give it a name and I'm going to give it a score. Now that's not quite correct. Whoops. Name and score. That's not quite what I need to do. I'll show you in a second. But these two values, N and S, are going to replace these two question marks here. I need to pass N and S into my procedure. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's going to say, I don't know what N and S are. And then just the same as I've done it here, once I've executed, run it, I need to say, yeah, you know what? I really meant to do that. So I'm going to do db.commit. So commit it to the database. And that's it. That's writing. Now, if there's an error in the database, such as it doesn't exist or I've done something wrong, it will throw what we call an exception, a crash, and we will handle it here. So I'm just going to write a very simple print statement as I've done every time else. I'm just going to say an error has occurred. The data was not added. So there we go, and pretty much done. I've got one more thing to do. Because I opened my database here, I need to close it again like I did here. So I just need to call db.close. Again, if I don't do that, I cannot delete the file if ever I need to. So now I've got a method to save high scores into my table. So before I finish the video, I'm going to call that procedure with a couple of save high score, a couple of pretend values. Let's try John. There's my text. He scored 20. And copy that. Paste that there. Let's do about 6. So I'm actually writing to my database. Let's do Mary, scored 22. So Mary should come above John when we look at the table. Let's do Fred. Fred scored 18. Let's do John again, because you can have him in multiple times. Let's say he scored 2, he didn't do very well. And let's have Felicity. She was okay, she scored 12 in the game. And Mabel. It's got to be Mabel. She also scored 20. So I'm going to add these into the database. So each time I want to add a score into my database, I call save high score, and it runs through this. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I've done nothing wrong. And now I can run my module. It will create the database if it doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it will just save the data in. However, when we take a look at high school, we cannot see any data. But down here it's telling me that it's got 8 kilobytes worth of data stored inside it. All we need to do now is have some way of reading that information, which is the last one, show high scores, reading that information and sorting them into order without using a bubble sort, a merge sort or an insert sort. So that's going to be my final video of this series, and then all this will be complete, ready to be copied and pasted into my main game program.